Chapter 204. The Plaza of the Sun, 2. Sister, Christina silently called out Anis's name while still walking with Eugene. Though in fact there was no need for her to call out like this. Anis was already reading Christina's inner thoughts. I don't want to, Anis responded without any hesitation. This was because Anis felt that, as someone in her position, such a response was only natural. Christina felt Anis's resolve in her reply and a refusal to back down. I also admit that I do have quite a lot of regrets left over from my life. From now on, there will be a few times when I will need to borrow your body, but not in a situation like this. Anis sternly refused. Why not? Christina asked. Anis responded sarcastically, why ask such an obvious question? It's because my lingering regrets might transform into greed for your body. While I'm familiar with enduring my desires, what if I'm unable to continue enduring them? It would be better for both you and me to not do something like this. We deserve to be happy. You're the one who told me that, sister, Christina reminded her. Anis faltered. Something like this isn't true happiness. It might even turn out to be a curse. Christina, I really do like you. I don't know how much longer I can remain in this world in this form, but as long as I'm here, I want to be like a caring sister to you. Anis fell silent for a few moments. Christina didn't rush Anis into concluding her decision, but the pace at which she had been walking with Eugene naturally slowed down a bit. Eugene glanced at Christina, who was walking without saying anything, but he didn't inquire into the reason for her continued silence. If my lingering regrets do transform into greed, then I might gradually want even more and more of your time, Anis eventually warned Christina. Christina promised, I'll do my best to give you what you want, sister. What if I end up wanting to take your body for myself completely? What if I end up regretting my death and want to fulfill my desire for life by gaining total possession of your body? If that is what sister wants, I will gladly yield my body. You deserve happiness more than I do, sister. Anis sighed. You really are such a sinister person. You can say something like that while believing I would never do such a thing. Christina thought innocently, it would be sinister of me to doubt you in the first place, sister. Anis chuckled at Christina's response and said, If you're really okay with it, then fine, Christina. I will gladly accept your offer. However, Christina repeated curiously. Until the sun is about to set, just let me use your body until then. While that brilliant light from the heavens still illuminates the earth, so that I won't dare to harbor any sinful desires. All right. Christina smiled faintly at getting her desired answer. She then took a deep breath and closed her eyes. Sister. Yes. Happy birthday. Their consciousness switched. Anis unconsciously burst into laughter at Christina's last words. To think that she would still be able to receive such congratulations. It had already been 200 years since Anis had died. On this day 300 years ago, Anis Slywood was born into the world. Her birth was rather miraculous. The imitation of the incarnation of light who conceived her was unable to endure the rigors of childbirth and died prematurely, so in the end, Anis could only emerge into the world after her dead mother's stomach was sliced open. Naturally, Anis didn't remember that moment. She didn't even know what the mother who had given birth to her even looked like. Her mother's name was also kept a secret. However, ever since she was young, there was one thing that she knew for sure. She was never going to give birth to her own children. Likewise, another thing Anis was sure about was that she wished she hadn't been born into this world. For the young Anis, her birthday was never a happy occasion. On her third birthday, Anis was forced to go to the Fount of Light for the first time and perform the ritual. From that point onwards, her cyclic visits to the fount grew ever more frequent. But no matter how short the gap in the cycle was, she would be forced to perform the ritual at the fountain on her birthday. Anis was also well aware that one's birthday was supposed to be a very special day. But while the other kids received something on their birthday, Anis never received a single present. She wasn't even given a chance to ask for one. However, there was one time. Though when exactly was it again? One of the nuns who took care of Anis once gave her a small stuffed toy on her birthday. Though rather than a shabby doll like this, the light that surges within you on your birthday is a much more gracious gift for the saintess. Had those words been meant as a consolation for the expressionless young girl? Anis smiled wryly and shook her head. So every birthday she would need to go to the Fount of Light and perform the ritual, absorbing more of the light into her own body. However, she had never once considered it to be a gift. That stuffed toy was the first and last birthday present that Anise had ever received in her childhood. Then after meeting Vermouth and leaving Yura's, Anise, Eugene suddenly spoke up, interrupting Anise's train of thought. While openly staring at Anise, who had a faint smile on her face, he tilted his head to the side and asked, "What shall we do for lunch?" Although Eugene's voice was as nonchalant as ever, Anise was well aware of the consideration laced into his words. So with a broad smile, Anise skipped past Eugene. "Let's go to a place with some great beer," Anise decided. The golden beverage made from fermented barley was one of Yura's most famous specialty products. Among the many monasteries scattered throughout Uras, there were several that specialized in brewing beer, and those whose brews were particularly good would export their beer abroad with labels bearing the name of their monastery. Anise was especially fond of the beer from Reincarnted Monastery. When she was in Helmuth, she rarely drank any beer, but after returning from Helmuth, she would drink beer every day while living at the Reincarnted Monastery. Thanks to such a connection, many shops purchased and sold specialty beer from the Reincarnted Monastery during the festival for Anise's birthday. Anise walked out into the street and quickly wove her way past all the waiters offering beer mugs. She didn't even need to try and take a sip from any of them. The aroma of the beer she had drank every day for decades had already permeated her soul. The quality of those mugs is all bad. It seems like they've even watered the beer down a bit. Some of the stores are even selling a completely different beer under the Reincarnted label. If I had my way, I'd like to crack their skulls a bit, but there isn't really any need to. People like them will all die and fall to hell anyway, Anise said gloatingly. The place that she eventually selected with care was an old pub whose sign hung up in an alleyway. However, the inside of the pub didn't look aged. Anise immediately liked the orange light coming from the large fireplace as well as the familiar din found in all pubs. As soon as she took her seat, she ordered 2 beers along with their meals. Anise began, "Although I'm only saying this now, I never imagined that a day would come when we'd be able to drink at a store like this with just the 2 of us." Eugene hummed, "I feel like we've been to quite a few pubs even livelier than this one." Anise frowned. "Hamel, I made it obvious, so why are you pretending not to notice? Didn't you hear me say, just the 2 of us?" With a wry smile, Eugene lifted his beer mug. Indeed, this was the first time he and Anise had gone out to drink all by themselves. "Well, if I have to be honest, rather than just the 2 of us, I'd rather have more people sitting with us like in the past," Eugene confessed. Vermouth, Sienna, and Molin. Eugene and Anise recalled the 3 missing members of their party. "We'll be able to come here someday with Sienna," Anise said optimistically. Their beer mugs were clinked together. "We might be able to bring Molin with us as well," Eugene reminded her. "No matter how much I think about it, I don't believe that bastard is dead just yet." "Don't be too sure of that. If you get your hopes up like that and it turns out Molin really is dead, you'll end up very disappointed," Anise warned Eugene. Eugene denied this. "Not really. If he's dead, then he's dead. Even I'm aware of how long 300 years is. As for Sir Vermouth, even I'm not too sure about him. But is there any point in talking about this sort of thing now?" Anise asked with a smile as she brought her beer mug to her mouth. The glass mug was as large as her head, but the beer that filled it to its brim was poured down Anise's throat in one gulp. "Aya." Anise trembled with ecstasy as she set down her empty glass and continued speaking. "What's important right now is that you and I are here drinking our beers." While they waited for their food to be served, they talked about various topics. While Eugene was examining the white flame formula while staying at the inn, Christina had gone to the Department of the Inquisition and the Department of Divine Magic Research. The Pope and Cardinal Bashara, who had become the sole remaining cardinal, didn't dare to stand in Christina's way, and Raphael, the leader of the Knights of the Blood Cross, had personally drawn his sword and accompanied Christina. The 2 organizations are really quite similar. They've grown a lot from what they were like when I was still alive. The Department of Divine Magic was trying to create new sanctuaries and holy relics through the use of light and miracles, Anise said without feeling the need to go into detail about what methods they might have experimented with. Although their food wasn't out yet, it was clear that she would lose her appetite if such topics were to leave her lips. Anise continued, "As for the Inquisition, it seems that they might have gained some kind of inspiration from a saintess who lived quite a long time ago. Apparently, they've been trying something for quite a long time, and it seems that Sergio Rogeris, who was once a member of the Inquisition, had been providing them with steady support. What are you talking about? Eugene asked with a frown. Anise explained, to put it in simple terms, the Inquisition was trying to make its own divine weapon. Rather than a biological weapon that focuses on the use of miracles and the light like a saintess, their version was more specialized for combat. Well, in my eyes, it looked no different from a chimera's nest. A chimera's nest. Eugene knew that such a term was, in fact, an oxymoron. Chimeras didn't lay eggs or give birth to young, let alone build nests. Chimeras were just creatures made by mixing the body parts of different monsters or even humans. They must be crazy, Eugene cursed. They really are, Anise agreed. Thanks to that, the Crusader had to cut the throats of quite a few of them. I'm only saying this now, but I think I quite like that paladin. Don't you think he's a bit too insane? Hamel, do you really think you're in a position to call someone else insane? What about me? Eugene protested defensively. I'm also only saying this now, but I think that of all of us, I was the most normal. Tao, that's insane, Anise said with a laugh as she shook her umpteenth beer mug. In any case, since we cleanly wiped them out and smashed and burned their research, I feel really relieved. The remains that hadn't already disappeared were also returned to the light with a sacrament. Anise lifted her white robe slightly. Then with a bright smile, Anise showed the flail she was wearing at her waist. The mace that I once used was also modified to make it easier for Christina to use, Anise revealed. Though to be honest, I think her skills are still quite immature. In fact, it should be because my standards are just too high. It can't be helped. After all, 300 years ago we were the best, Eugene said with an identical smile to Anise's. At these words, Anise pounded her beer mug on the table and burst into giggles. Yes, that's right. We were the best. Though Hamel, I think you were still a bit lacking, Anise insisted. Eugene scoffed. Are you being serious? Hey now, did I touch your ego? Don't take it too seriously. I'm talking about you from when we first met, Anise calmly clarified. Their food finally came out. As she skewered a sausage on a large fork, Anise chuckled and said, I can say this with all certainty, we were definitely the best. However, Hamel, when you first met with us, you weren't all that great. Even now my memories of that day are still clear. Sienna, Molan, and I were all unable to understand just why Sir Vermouth wanted to accept you as one of his comrades. Do you think I understood that? Eugene grumbled as he sliced his meat. Eugene was also very familiar with this story. In that port 300 years ago, Vermouth had single-handedly tried to recruit Hamel into his party without even receiving the understanding and consent of his other party members. In the end, the other party members also acknowledged Hamel's potential through his challenge to Vermouth and accepted him as a party member. But the Hamel that they had first met definitely did not fit the image of a hero's companion. In the end, Sir Vermouth was right, Anise sighed. It had been a long time since she last had a drink, and more importantly, Christina's body had never partaken in alcohol, so it quickly grew intoxicated. Anise enjoyed this languid state of drunkenness. If she wanted to, she could easily shake it off like a cloud of dust, but Anise didn't bother to do so. She slightly tilted her ruddy face as she stared at Eugene. Anise hesitated. We were perfect together. It was because there were all 5 of us that the party was perfect. So the absence of one of us proved fatal. Are you also trying to reprimand me for dying first? Eugene complained. I guess that means Sienna already reprimanded you? She's too weak-minded. She couldn't even muster up a reprimand. Instead, after talking about something like that, she just started crying by herself and begging for my forgiveness. I think I know what you mean, Anise nodded. Sienna couldn't get over her petulance and said something like this to you, right? That you went and died on your own or something of that. Something similar, Eugene confirmed. It seems that Sienna also hasn't changed, Anise noted fondly. Even though she couldn't bear to say such a thing, she still said it and then burst into tears on her own. Hamel, do you remember the dream that I showed you? What did you think? What do you mean? Eugene demanded. Didn't it make you sad? Did you feel heartache or longing? Anise asked with a mischievous smile. This smile that made Anise look so cunning was why Eugene and Sienna had called her a snake behind her back during his previous life. Wouldn't you? Eugene admitted reluctantly. It still feels a little unfair, Anise pouted. At that time Sienna, Mullen, I, and even Sir Vermouth were shedding tears, but I've never seen you cry. It's better if you don't see it. My crying face is really fucking ugly. Ahaha. Is it even possible for you to make an ugly expression with your current face? Why can't it be done? Eugene grumbled as he reached out for his beer mug. At that moment, Anise leaped up from her seat. She leaned forward as if she was collapsing over the table, then her hands grabbed onto Eugene's cheeks. Anise's face suddenly drew closer. Foo-foo, Anise chuckled to herself. Their lips weren't touching. With only a slight distance between them, Anise stared at Eugene with a smile on her ruddy face. I really have to hold myself back, Anise whispered. Her hands pressed down on Eugene's cheeks. Eugene's face transformed into that of a goldfish as his lips were foolishly pushed forward into a pucker. Anise chucked at this appearance before letting go of Eugene's face. If I act on my urges once more, Sienna might really go crazy and try to get rid of me. It would be fine if I intended to stay here, but once I finally ascend, won't that leave poor Christina to be harassed by Sienna? Anise reluctantly murmured. Really now? Eugene coughed. Stupid Hamel, what are you going to do now? Anise asked challengingly. Now that I've made it so assertively clear that even a fool like you should be able to understand it, and Sienna must also have conveyed her feelings to you, even if she wasn't quite straightforward as I was. She definitely didn't do what you did. In fact, she didn't even try to say something directly. Sienna is really the exact same as she was 300 years ago. Eugene let out a deep sigh and pulled his beer mug over. Truthfully speaking, I'm flustered and, surprised. I never really thought of you two that way. Are you a eunuch? Cough. Eugene spat out the beer that had just flowed down his throat. Anise quickly pulled herself back to avoid the spray of beer. Eugene yelped, Hey. How could you say something like that? Now wasn't it only natural? Where did you find the time to think about such things 300 years ago? Who wouldn't think about such things when there was an opportunity to relax? Sienna and I only started thinking about what happened between us after the war had ended. Unfortunately, the war ended in such a way and you had already died, Anise said with a wry smile as she drank more beer. Well, at the time I had no intention of revealing my feelings for you throughout the rest of my life. I was disillusioned with many things, and I knew that my existence wasn't one that could afford to pursue such happiness. However, since I've already died like that, I just want to know if it's all right for me to pursue it now. Ahem, Eugene cleared his throat instead of answering. I already know. You've never held such feelings for me, right? Hamel, your feelings for me were that of friendship towards a fellow comrade and sympathy. Isn't that right? Anise asked resolutely. Eugene didn't avoid answering this time. I felt sorry for you. You never once let out a scream of pain even though your back was drenched in blood. You drank alcohol every day to endure the agony, and you still stubbornly tried to save those bastards who just wanted to die without taking care of your own body, so I did feel sorry for you. I really liked the way you cared for me, Anise said as she rested her chin in her hand and stared at Eugene. I liked the way you treated me like a fragile piece of glass. Hamel, you're usually incredibly rough and violent, but whenever blood was pouring from my stigmata, and I exposed my back in front of you, your rough hands that were covered in calluses and had slaughtered countless demons, they felt very soft and delicate. In that case, should I dig out a few more wounds for you? Eugene asked sarcastically. Anise immediately exposed him. You're embarrassed. I also like that side of you. No matter what you might think of me, it doesn't really matter. Fortunately, thanks to the help of the light, I am able to remain in the world like this, and Christina was considerate of me and even gave me this chance to resolve some of my lingering regrets. Well, about that, I still don't really know what I feel. You like me? And Sienna, she also likes me? Eugene asked with some disbelief. In Sienna's case, you already had a few guesses, right? Well, it may be a little. It seems like you also at least feel something towards Sienna, Anise observed. You probably have more feelings for Sienna than you do for me, right? Eugene complained. Can we just drink our beers? I'm not going to rush an answer from you. The waiter brought them new beer mugs. Anise raised her glass first, and Eugene responded by raising his beer mug to meet hers. I'll do my best to make you love us, Anise promised while still conscious of Christina, who was listening from the other side of their shared consciousness. Their beer mugs clinked together. While Anise was draining her beer mug in large gulps, Eugene just tilted his head to the side without drinking any of his beer. Us? Are you talking about Sienna and yourself? Eugene asked inquisitively. Stupid bastard, Anise said with a sincere tone of voice. Why did she feel the need to curse at him? Eugene just clicked his tongue instead of asking and reached his hand into his cloak. Happy birthday, Eugene said even as he felt strange for saying those words to Anise, and placed a gift-wrapped package on their table. Anise hesitated. What on earth is this? Today's your birthday, isn't it? Eugene pointed out awkwardly. Hamel. Did you really prepare a present for me? It's nothing that impressive. Hold on, don't tell me what it is. I want to confirm it personally with my eyes, Anise said as she quickly tore the wrapping paper off of her gift. Could there be a letter inside the wrapping along with the present? Anise thought about it for a moment, and Christina, who was still watching from the other side of their shared consciousness, was also full of expectation, so she also looked into the gift box through Anise's eyes. Tisk. There wasn't any letter. Anise clicked her tongue at having her expectations betrayed. Hamel complained, no matter how much you dislike it, isn't it a bit too rude to click your tongue like that? Hamel. I wasn't clicking my tongue because of that. I was just hoping that you might have included a letter along with the present. Anise's expression abruptly changed. She smiled sincerely as she clasped her trembling hands in front of her chest. Inside the gift box lay a beautifully crafted necklace. There was only a string without any decorations, so it was for Anise to recognize what this necklace was meant for. Your rosary, Eugene began. Anise currently had a rosary hanging from her neck. It was the rosary that Anise had used in her previous life and that they had since retrieved from the Vatican's special relics vault. The handcrafted cross still gleamed beautifully, but the necklace's string was only made of leather, so it had since become faded and worn out. Its string has gone bad, Eugene finished. Foo-foo. Anise took off her rosary with a laugh. She changed the string for the one she had just received as a gift and then pulled back her hair so it would be easier to put the rosary back around her neck. Seeing this sight, Eugene got up without thinking much about it and hung the rosary around Anise's neck. Looking up at Eugene's face that was titled towards her, Anise felt a strong urge to raise her head to meet his. Should she just lean a little more forward? It is often said that the first time is the hardest and the second time is the easiest, and hadn't Anise already overcome the challenge of the first kiss? Sister. Christina screamed inside of their head. If Anise had really decided on doing this, it couldn't be helped, but Christina felt far too embarrassed watching it happen from here. I'll be patient, Anise assured her. Sure, she really did want to go through with it, but Anise still held herself back. It was for the sake of Sienna and Christina. What are you looking at? Eugene eventually asked. I'm looking at you, Anise replied with a smile. Eugene just grinned and sat down again. We've finished eating, so is there anywhere else you want to go from here? I still haven't finished yet. I want to drink some more beer, Anise answered as she caressed the necklace around her neck. 300 years ago, even after leaving Ura's, she had never really celebrated her birthday. That went for Vermouth, Molin, Sienna, and Hamel as well. When it was someone's birthday, they would at least give their congratulations, but they never exchanged presents. This was because they all didn't have the sort of personality to care about such a thing. However, even if they didn't exchange gifts, having other people recognize that it was your birthday still made the day quite enjoyable. Even in the terrible Devildom, when the time came for someone's birthday, they would set up camp early and open up their carefully preserved stores of liquor. Anise had felt that each and every day of her travels with her friends was a gift to her. Just a little more, Anise muttered to herself. That went for a moment like this as well. Anise smiled as she felt a pleasant drowsiness settle over her. The hustle and bustle of the pub. The sound of firewood burning in the fireplace. The noise of beer mugs clinking. And with Hamel sitting in front of her. All of these made Anise feel grateful that she was alive. I want to stay here with you until the sun goes down, Anise said with a smile as she raised her beer mug once more. Chapter 205. The Plaza of the Sun, 3. The sun was setting. Anise looked out the window, still holding a half-finished mug of beer. The pub was located deep within an alley, but even here the light of the sunset was flowing in, albeit dimly. Well then, Anise sighed. She had drunk a lot of beer today. Though considering that she hadn't been able to drink for the hundreds of years following her death, No matter how much Anise drank, she still felt like it wouldn't be enough. Even so, Anise had drunk so much that she didn't feel like drinking anymore right now. She had also received a gift. As such, Anise didn't have any lingering regrets for the time being. If Christina's body wasn't so special, and if Anise didn't have a role to play in the future, then she was confident that she would have been able to fully satisfy her desires with what she had just experienced today. "I'll just head in now," Anise informed Eugene. Eugene hummed as he scanned the area around Anise with tired eyes. The floor was filled with the glasses of the beers she had drunk, and a large keg of beer had even been placed beside her. It would have been physically impossible for a normal person, no, for any human, to have drunk that much beer in such a short period of time. It was only made possible because Anise had used divine magic on her own body to enable her to drink a lot of alcohol. "See you later," Eugene said gruffly. He almost subconsciously said, "Take care on your way back." But since her body was staying still and only the consciousness in charge of the body was changing, wouldn't it be funny to be told to take care on your way back? After a few moments, Anise's body froze. Then the eyelashes of her closed eyes began to tremble. Christina covered her mouth and released a painful moan. Christina didn't really enjoy drinking. If she had to drink, then she preferred a dry wine. As for a mug of beer cold enough to make your head spin, she had never once thought that something like that could taste good. Now she had ended up drinking more of that beer than was even humanly possible. Although Anise had evaporated most of the beer she had drunk using divine magic, Christina was still left bothered by a throbbing headache and the smell of alcohol that overwhelmed her senses with each breath. "Are you all right?" Eugene asked as he approached her. In response, Christina rose from her seat in a panic and tried to step back. As her body still hadn't recovered from its drunkenness, her legs twisted a little as she retreated. Because of this, Christina was about to fall, only for Eugene to reach out to her without delay, grab her by the arm and support her waist. Eugene frowned. "It seems like you aren't feeling so good, right?" "No, you can't," Christina stammered as she covered her face, which was still reddened from intoxication. "What do you mean you can't?" Eugene asked in confusion. Christina stammered. I smell of alcohol. It's not a pleasant scent, so." "Really now?" Eugene scoffed. After wandering around for over a dozen years with a group of comrades who would lose all restraint when it came to alcohol, there was no way that Eugene would feel disgusted by the smell of beer at this point. Or at least that's what Eugene thought, but he didn't feel any need to embarrass Christina any further by spitting such words out of his mouth. Instead, he drew up a spell formula inside his head and cast some magic. "Ah," Christina gasped as she felt the spell wrap around her. The throbbing headache and the smell of alcohol that permeated her body completely disappeared. Anise clicked her tongue from inside Christina's head. Anise was obviously capable of erasing Christina's intoxication as well as the headache and the smell of beer, yet she hadn't bothered to do so. She had left just enough intoxication so that Christina's head would be left clouded to a certain extent, and her emotions would be slightly intensified. On top of that, Anise had even carefully adjusted the state of her body so that Christina would stagger a little when she got up. Why did she do all this? She was thinking of watching the fun that might result from this exquisitely balanced state of intoxication. So Anise was genuinely annoyed that Eugene had mastered such a spell. It really did come as a surprise that he would learn to use magic. He could have just relied on his body like he did in his previous life. Anise whined. Christina pretended to not hear Anise's murmur as she hurriedly corrected her posture. She ran a hand through her disheveled hair and coughed. "My apologies for showing such a shameful appearance. You unlike Lady Anise, I'm not that used to drinking, so." "It's not that she's used to drinking, she's just a monster," Eugene grumbled as he pointed at the closed door of the pub. "So what are you going to do? Would you like to stay here as well? Or else shall we head out?" Christina hesitated. "Let's go out." "That's right. I've already eaten far too much, so I want to take a bit of a walk." It wasn't like Christina had any plans. In the first place, Christina had intended to yield the entire day to Anise. It was Anise who had placed the limit on her time in Christina's body till sunset. Most festivals were more fun at night than they were during the day. The same went for Anise's birthday festivities. While the parade had started during the day, the parade at night was especially splendid. Entertainers would march along while dancing and wearing fancy clothes and accessories, and an orchestra would follow behind them, singing hymns with cheerful lyrics. Christina wasn't able to lead the way out of the alley where the pub was located because the night parade was passing through the main street in front of the alleyway. While there had already been a lot of people attending the festival, the street in front of them was so full that it wasn't an exaggeration to say that there was no space left to take a single step. It seems that it would be better to head back in, Christina said in a resigned tone. Really? Eugene questioned. Christina remained silent. I want to stay and watch, Eugene admitted. Don't you? There probably wasn't any hidden meaning to his words. However, Christina couldn't come up with a light-hearted response to his casual question. This was because the question that had been asked so offhandedly had set off ripples in the depths of her heart. There was silence for a few moments as Christina couldn't think of what to say. Eugene asked another question without waiting for a response. Have you ever watched it before? That question also shook Christina's heart. She had seen something like this once. There had also been a time when she had wanted to watch. When they were young, almost everyone would have done the same. There were many orphans in the monastery where Christina spent her childhood. That meant that there were many children who all needed a lot to eat, which also meant that they needed to keep just as many ingredients in storage. As a result, there were many rats and various other pests in the monastery. If they were left alone, such harmful pests would increase in number to an extent where nothing more could be done about it, so periodic fumigation was required. Once a month, the monastery's clergy would gather the children in the playground and cover their mouths and noses with cloths. Then the priests would carry in small stovepipes that would produce thick smoke and disinfect the entire facility. They would be told to stay where they were, but the children wouldn't listen to such an order. Where was the fun and excitement in that? Although it was hard for her to remember at this point what kind of feelings she had felt at that time, when she was young before she was adopted, Christina had also chased the smoke coming from the stovepipes. That was Christina's closest memory of participating in a parade. Presently, there were a lot of children in the street in front of them. The children, ignorant of the unpleasant truths behind the Yura's religion, were chasing after the parade while giggling in the way that children do. As for Christina, she had never really experienced anything like a festival. Even when she was living in the monastery, she had never been allowed outside. Thinking back on it now, all those restrictions were probably part of the attempt to monitor and control the carefully constructed Saint Candidate, the imitation incarnation. For Christina, the festivals were just days when meat pies or large hunks of meats were served during the shared lunches from time to time, and the closest thing to a parade was chasing the smoke coming from the fumigation stovepipes. Even after she was adopted by Sergio, her situation hadn't improved. Instead, it had become even crueler. While the meals were incomparably better than her days in the monastery, no matter how delicious the food she ate was, she just couldn't feel like those days were anything to celebrate. In Sergio's mansion and Trescia Cathedral, there wasn't anything like the smoke which Christina and the other children would chase after while laughing. Christina's childhood was crushed and torn apart by despair and hatred before being covered up by a slim pretense of normalcy. It was only after her childhood had ended that she was finally allowed to go to the festival. But by then Christina was no longer a child. She stood at the forefront of the Trescia festival as a saint candidate, but to Christina, the festival was just a propaganda platform for the saint candidate, while the person known as her was executed. Yes, Christina eventually muttered. So you don't want to watch this? Eugene asked in confirmation. I'm not sure, Christina responded weakly. But this was a lie. She wasn't unsure. She truly didn't want to continue watching. Wouldn't her memories of the past, where she suffered such despair and hatred while hiding under a thin veil of normalcy, overlap with today's happy memories if she needlessly watched the festival? While Christina had already received the salvation she needed, she was afraid that the girl she used to be would be fueled by the despair from her past, which had already passed but could never be forgotten. Do you really need to consider the question of whether or not to watch something like a parade so seriously? Eugene muttered as he scratched at his head in confusion. Without replying, Christina just turned to stare at all the people filling the street in front of them. Eugene suddenly reached out and grabbed Christina's wrist as she stood there blankly. Christina gasped. Ah. Christina Rogerus. Eugene called out her name. Eugene didn't know what Christina was thinking. However, he did know that most of her life had been full of misery. She was stuck here, hesitating at a time like this, probably because the painful memories of her childhood had overlapped with the colorful and joyful festival taking place in front of them. "I've already saved you," Eugene said as he pulled on Christina's wrist and slowly strode forward. Christina couldn't think of what to say, nor could she find the will to resist. Not knowing what to do, she just allowed herself to be dragged along by Eugene. "Since I've saved you, I won't ask you to do something like repay the favor. I was the one who decided to save you on my own, and it was my choice to do so. As such, all you need to do is to make your own decision," Eugene said as he walked. "What are you talking about?" Christina asked in confusion. "Whether or not you want to keep following me," Eugene clarified. Christina was honestly dumbfounded. Was there even a need to make a choice? Christina's intentions were clear. She had no thoughts of remaining in Yura's. Even if Eugene said that he hated her and wanted her to get lost, Christina would still follow behind Eugene. Was it in order to repay the favor of saving her? No, Christina was well aware that Eugene would despise such a reason. It was just Christina wanted to follow him. Eugene was the hero, and the truth was he was also the stupid Hamel from 300 years ago. But those sorts of things weren't important to the current Christina. Eugene hadn't saved the Saintess. He had saved Christina Rogerus. As such, Christina just wanted to accompany him, not as the hero or as Hamel, but simply as Eugene Lionheart. "I will follow you," Christina stated firmly. "If that's the case, you can't be afraid or hesitant when it comes to just watching something like this," Eugene scolded. There were a lot of people on this street. However, wherever Eugene walked, the people would move slightly to open up a path. They weren't even conscious of why they were moving the way they did, nor of their stuttering steps backward and the way that their bodies secretly trembled. All of this was the unavoidable result of their instinctive behavior. Having opened up a path, Eugene dragged Christina behind him. Eugene continued, "Because from now on, this kind of thing should just be an insignificant part of the scenery to you." Christina stayed silent. "Aren't you here now?" Eugene reminded her. "I don't know what you were thinking of, what you were focused on, or what you might have remembered. I don't even want to know, and I won't even bother asking." Eugene's steps suddenly came to a halt. He let go of Christina's hand and pointed to what lay in front of them. It was sparkling, colorful, fun, and noisy. The festival parade Christina had imagined as a child was marching past right in front of her. Eugene instructed her, "So no matter what, just keep looking." Christina stood there dumbfounded as she stared straight ahead of her. She hadn't spent all her time imagining watching this parade. Once she became a saint candidate, there were many times when she saw the parade in person. She had even stood at the head of the parade herself on many occasions. However, her feelings now were completely different from what she had felt at those times. The agony, hatred, and rage that she had felt in the past, the sense of ridicule she felt for those who praised and admired her as the saint candidate without knowing anything about her, and the sense of shame that she had felt for herself and the unnatural nature of the saint candidate, she wasn't feeling any of those complex feelings at this moment. Just like Eugene had said, the memories and emotions of back then, as well as the scenery in front of her, all looked insignificant. Christina felt a huge divide between how she was feeling now and the view she was looking at. There was upbeat music, colorful costumes and decorations, the laughter of children, and the admiration of the spectators. All of it felt a little far away from her, but at the same time Eugene, who was right in front of her, felt a little too close. "See, it's really nothing," Eugene said with life as he turned his head to look at her. Even though she should have already shaken off the remaining intoxication, Christina's face felt strangely hot. Christina's lips moved soundlessly for a moment before she stopped and ducked her head. She stepped back as if to run away, but Eugene wouldn't allow Christina to run from him. "Isn't that so?" Eugene pressed her. Christina stammered, "It's different. This is really something different. I just..." At this moment, Christina couldn't help but feel like she was facing a huge dilemma. Her heart wanted to turn around and run away. It wasn't because the trivial sights in front of her had made her feel emotions that she didn't want to recall, but in fact, it was simply because she felt too embarrassed to keep looking at Eugene's high-spirited face. However, Christina absolutely, definitely couldn't confide such a feeling to Eugene. She would much rather leave everything to a niece and hide by switching their consciousness. But her mischievous sister had no intention of giving her even a word of advice, even though she was listening to everything that they were saying right now. What if she really did run away? Unless Christina explained things properly, then Eugene would definitely come to a misunderstanding. Christina would rather die than allow Eugene to have such a misunderstanding of her. If she ran away after he had dragged her all the way here and said such things to her, wouldn't Eugene feel like everything he had done had been in vain? Christina was afraid that, in such a case, Eugene would feel disappointed in himself. Although there's no reason for him to feel that way, but Christina was stuck in turmoil. "What's with you?" Eugene asked. It was time for her to reach a decision on her dilemma. Christina took a deep breath, then undoing her step backward, she took a step forward. Let's follow it," Christina nervously proposed. Eugene was taken aback. "What? Wouldn't it be fun to follow the parade?" Christina quickly stammered out before pushing herself into the procession following the parade. After staring at Christina for a few moments, Eugene smirked and began walking beside her. Why can't this night be as dark as it should be? That was Christina's sincere desire. Merciful light, please don't illuminate this night. That was what she prayed for, but it was hopeless. Nighttime in the capital city Eurasia was always illuminated by soft lights, and at this moment in particular, their surroundings were overly brightened by the shining parade. Christina felt like these bright lights were clearly illuminating her face, so she couldn't help but feel embarrassed. She didn't want to show such a heavy blush to Eugene. At the same time, she also didn't want the crowd to notice that her face so closely resembled a niece. Right now, there were too many people surrounding them. Was it because of the mood? It felt as if their eyes were getting drawn to her face. Christina belatedly realized something. She was currently wearing a robe with her hood pulled down behind her. Christina quickly pulled the hood up deep over her head, covering her face. "What are you doing?" Eugene asked from beside her. "I'm afraid that someone might recognize me," Christina admitted. Eugene sighed. "You're doing that again. Please understand my concerns," Christina pleaded. "There were already a lot of people in the plaza earlier, but unlike then, we are actually taking part in a procession now. If anyone finds out I'm here, it might end up ruining the parade." Eugene glanced at Christina through narrowed eyes. He still wasn't really satisfied with her excuse, but unlike before, he didn't forcefully remove Christina's hood. They continued walking together like this for quite some time. Even with all the cheerful music, Christina could clearly hear the beating of her own heart. Even though she continued walking along with the procession while pretending nothing was wrong, her face was still steaming. "Holy light, please." Even with her hood pulled down low, their surroundings were so bright it felt like a spotlight was shining on her face. So Christina tried praying once more. Had her earnest prayer managed to reach its target? All of the lights that had been brightening up the parade went out at the same moment. The same went for all the lights that had been illuminating the street. The parade came to a stop with the sudden arrival of the darkness. The procession that had been following the parade looked around their darkened surroundings and murmured to themselves. Boom! The darkness was lifted. Fireworks shot up from a tall clock tower nearby and lit up the sky. These fireworks were launched to mark the end of the festival. The muttering of the crowd turned into cheers. Everyone lifted their heads to watch as flowers bloomed and lights fluttered in the sky. Only Christina didn't. She pulled her hood further down with both hands and kept her head bowed. "Christina Rogerus," Eugene called out her name. Christina's shoulders trembled at his call. His hands slowly approached her and covered both of Christina's hands. Eugene told her, "Right now the only one looking at you is me." His rough hands, which were covered in calluses, pulled off Christina's hood. Christina quietly gasped. "Ah!" High up in the sky, the fireworks exploded. Christina looked up to see Eugene staring down at her and the fireworks shooting up from behind him. "Because of that, you shouldn't hide yourself," Eugene insisted. Christina was well aware that these words weren't addressed to her as the saintess. Instead, they were addressed to Christina Rogerus. Eugene continued, "If you have decided to follow me, then you need to be looking at the same things as me. Without being too conscious of her role as the saint. Without hiding herself from the gazes and mutters of her surroundings." All of that simply felt insignificant and distant now, just like she had felt before. Everything around her was insignificant and distant, but only Eugene felt close. Was what she currently feeling admiration or worship? Or else? Christina tried not to think too deeply about it. Everything just felt beautiful. Fireworks soared up into the sky and below them stood Eugene. Eugene, who had stretched out his hand to her while she was trapped in her fate as the saint, which was more like a curse. It was Eugene Lionheart, not the hero, who had saved not the saint but Christina Rogerus. It felt like there was a miracle so close to her that all she needed to do was to stretch out one hand to touch it. It was so beautiful and lovely that her eyes were dazzled by it. Yes, Christina swallowed a trembling breath as she closed her eyes. Her eyes were so dazzled that it felt like she would go blind if she kept looking. For Christina, all of this was a miracle. As such, Christina burst into laughter. Without opening her closed eyes, without putting off any sort of pretense to mask her true feelings, she just focused on this miracle that was so close, so bright, and so beautiful. Yes, Sir Eugene, Christina repeated with a smile. Chapter 206, Babel 1. On the day he was preparing to leave the inn where he had been staying for the past 3 days, Eugene had to blink for a few moments when he saw how Christina had arrived at his door. It wasn't an unannounced visit. Since Eugene had decided to leave Ura's and return to the Lionheart estate today, he had told Christina to come to his lodgings before noon. But don't you have a little too much luggage? After pondering what he should say for a few moments, Eugene eventually spat out these words. He wasn't just saying this for no reason. Christina's luggage really was quite a lot. She had 1, 2, 3, 4 travel suitcases as large as her. Eugene let out a sigh and shook his head. Why have you packed so much junk? They're all things that I need, Christina responded seriously. Eugene glanced at an open slit in one of her suitcases. Through the gap he saw clerical robes and miscellaneous items that seemed to have been crammed in randomly. It didn't look like she had bought anything new. Instead, she seemed to have packed everything that she had already been using. When did you even get the time to pack them all? Eugene asked in disbelief. 2 days ago, I hired someone to go to Trescia Cathedral, pack all my personal belongings and retrieve them for me, Christina revealed. Eugene argued, was there really a need for you to take all the items you had used there with you? You could just buy new items when we get there. I don't want to have to owe any more favors to you, Sir Eugene, Christina responded with a determined face. As of today, I will be completely independent of Ura's. Previously, I used the bishop's card issued by the Holy See and Sergio Roger's card, but from now on I will no longer make use of them. Oh, why not? Because if I continue to be financially dependent on them, that wouldn't be true independence. In other words, I am currently penniless and jobless. Well, fine. Both the Lionheart clan and I have a lot of money, so if you need anything... Sir Eugene, Christina interrupted him once more as she stared at Eugene through narrowed eyes. Didn't I say it just now? I don't want to be in any further debt to you, Sir Eugene. As such, I need to take all of this luggage with me. In that case, does that mean you don't want a room in the Lionheart mansion? Eugene teased. Sir Eugene, if you want me to camp out in the garden and be covered by the cold morning dew, then I will gladly do so, Christina stated confidently. In the end, doesn't that mean that she did want a room? Isn't all this luggage you brought with you things that were purchased with the bishop's and Roger's cards? Eugene pointed out. Christina argued back. Strictly speaking, rather than being purchased by me, most of these items were handed over to me. And judging from what I've been through in the past, I've more than paid what these are worth. Fine, Eugene casually conceded as he opened his cloak. Mare, who was sitting within the opening, pouted as she saw Chrisitna's luggage. Since it couldn't be helped, Mare had decided to accept it. However, when she considered that this sinister dual-personality saintess would be entering the Lionheart mansion and hovering by Eugene's side, Mare felt as if black clouds of ash were erupting from deep within her heart. Mare sighed. You really are a two-faced person, one. Why even say that you don't want to be further indebted when you're showing up at his mansion penniless and looking for a place to live? I don't have any money on me right now, but if I use my abilities I can make as much money as I want, no? Christina said challengingly as she stared back at Mare, her eyes slightly parted in amusement. I'm aware that there aren't any priests staying at the Lionheart clan's estate. While you do have excellent healers and a good supply of potions to replace them, a high priest's healing magic is a miracle that goes beyond the limits of medicine and ordinary magic. Mare trailed off, unable to deny this. I dare say that there is no other priest in this current era who is more skilled in healing magic than I am. If someone like me is willing to entrust myself to the Lionheart clan in exchange for my abilities, Then the Lionheart's patriarch would definitely be willing to pay the price, Christina stated confidently. Mare groaned in dismay. Ugh. Christina sniffed. Although it's true that I am penniless at the moment, I have no intention of acting like a certain someone who uses their small body as a weapon to brazenly beg for food and sweets. What did you say? Mare stammered as twin flames lit up in her eyes. He never done something like that. In fact, I've always been helpful. Although it seems that Lady Christina doesn't know me very well, I've always been assisting Sir Eugene's magic. Christina interrupted her. I've never said that you were the one who performed such shameless behavior, so why are you reacting so violently? Sir Eugene. I really hate this woman. Mare cried out as she climbed onto Eugene's chest with a tearful expression. Eugene took a few deep breaths as he thought about what might lie ahead in his future. He sighed. Don't fight. Christina acted innocent. Oh my, what fight? I was just answering Lady Mare's questions. Mare quickly tattled on her. That woman looked at me and called me a shameless parasite. Just try to get along, Eugene absent-mindedly persuaded as he patted Mare on the back and stored Christina's luggage inside his cloak. What about Lord Raphael? Isn't he coming to see you off? I begged him not to do that. Because useless rumors are already floating around, nothing good would come of it if he did, Christina revealed. So it was happening already. Well, rumors would start flying in any case, Eugene said with a shrug. Initially, on Anissa's feast day, it was meant to be announced that Christina had graduated from being the saint candidate to becoming a full saint. However, Christina had rejected any papal recognition, and the Pope and Cardinal Bashara had accepted this. So in the end, Christina Rogerus was still a saint candidate as far as the world was concerned. However, in this current era, Christina was the only saint candidate in Eurus. Even if she had yet to be officially declared a saint, all of the citizens of Eurus considered Christina to be the saint. So for Christina to even be suspected of leaving Eurus and swearing herself to the Lionheart clan of Kiel, a foreign country, would result in hugely impactful rumors that would be impossible to hide. Yes, that's certainly true, Christina slowly nodded. A carriage they had booked in advance was waiting for them outside the inn. Their next destination was the Warp Gate on the outskirts of Eurasia. They should be able to arrive at the Lionheart mansion by this evening at the very latest. I've prepared a pretext, Christina reported. What kind of pretext? Eugene asked. I can claim that I'm accompanying you to treat the elves who are under the Lionheart's protection, Christina explained. Aren't many of them suffering from the demonic disease? That would only serve as a pretext to a certain extent. Eugene was also well aware that the elves' demonic disease was incurable. Even Saint Anise was unable to purify the elves of the demonic disease. The only thing that could halt and alleviate the demonic disease was the spiritual influence of the World Tree. All kinds of concerns began popping up in Eugene's mind. Although this might seem obvious, Eugene had yet to inform the Lionhearts that he would be bringing Christina with him. Trying to explain things through a letter would be difficult and awkward, so he was just planning to bring her with him and set her up in an empty room. I don't think the patriarch will have any complaints, but Christina had even come up with a plausible reason for her presence. The problem was that this hadn't happened just once or twice. He had brought Layman Schulhoff with him from Nahoma. He had brought over 100 elves back with him from Samar. Then he had brought Mare back with him from Arath. And now he had ended up bringing Christina back with him from Eurus. Gilead might not say anything much about it, but Ancilla might just try to grab him by the collar. No, on second thought she might just overlook it without any protest. Eugene was well aware that Ancilla was surprisingly humane and soft-hearted. When Eugene had brought 100 elves back with him from Samar without giving them any prior warning, Ancilla had been furious enough to crush her own fan in her hands. However, in the end she had still offered up the estate's forest out of pity for the elves. After a few months of this, thanks to the saplings of the World Tree that Eugene had transplanted, rather than worsening, their demonic disease was showing signs of improvement. Still, Ancilla, who was unaware of this fact, sometimes used her walks as an excuse to stop by the elves' village and ask Signard about the state of their illness. If we tell her that Christina had come to help treat the elves. Although healing was healing, this wasn't just anyone they were talking about. This was the Saintess of the Holy Empire, who Ancilla would entrust with the treatment of her family. How could Ancilla, who was obsessed with raising the Lionheart name to greater heights, refuse such an offer? Or at least that was what Eugene had thought up so far. The Devildom, too. That was what the land to the north had been called since ancient times. Even now, most people on this continent still called it the Devildom. Even the people who lived on this land did not deny the fact that this place was the Devildom. As the meaning of the name suggests, this was where the countless demon folk and demon kings resided. However, that meaning had undergone significant changes from what it was hundreds of years ago. For the human citizens of the Devildom of Helmuth, the demon folk were their friendly neighbors. They didn't hunt and eat humans indiscriminately like they were said to in the old stories, nor did they place chains on their souls. The demon king wasn't a war criminal who sought to trample the entire world beneath their feet and cause mass slaughter, but instead a gentleman who was kinder and wiser than the king of any ordinary country. The demon king listened to the requests of his human citizens, protected them and made their lives richer and happier. This was the new Devildom, a land of opportunity. Although the cost of purchasing citizenship was quite high, if one earnestly desired it, it wasn't completely unaffordable. In addition to that, Helmuth's immigration support system was very humane, and depending on the number of years of labor you agreed to upon your death, the cost could be significantly reduced. Thanks to this, people living in the poorer countries of the north would often knock on the door of Helmuth's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, caught up in the Helmuth Dream. 3. The city of skyscrapers, the land of opportunity, the capital of the Helmuth Empire, Pandemonium. The buildings in this city were taller than any other city on this continent. Rather than castle towers, the city was full of high-rise buildings with dozens of floors. These tall skyscrapers that couldn't have been raised by any human strength were proof of the greatness of the Demon King. Amongst these skyscrapers was a sleek black building standing tall at the very center of Pandemonium. This was Babel. At 99 floors, this building wasn't just the tallest in Pandemonium but also the tallest in all of Helmuth. Without anything to hide, Babel was the Demon King's castle, where the Demon King of Incarceration who ruled over all of Helmuth personally resided. Is the master of the Demon Dragon Castle absent this time as well? On the 90th floor of Babel, the Blade of Incarceration, Gavid Lindman, stood with his hands behind his back as he looked down through the glass walls of the building. Far below he could see the forest of buildings that, while incomparable to Babel, were still tall enough to be called high-rises. Dozens of fish, large and small, were floating between the buildings. These were the airfish. The airfish that swam through the skies of Pandemonium were part of the security system that kept the crime rate of Pandemonium under perfect control. The airfishes were able to monitor this entire city of skyscrapers without any blind spots while transmitting all that they observed to Babel's control center. Even at this very moment in the control center dozens of floors below, thousands of souls that had contracted themselves into postmortem labor, and the hundreds of demon folk who controlled these souls, were working hard to protect the city's security by digging through the monitoring images sent by the airfish. The door of the spacious conference room opened as a middle-aged man walked in and answered Gavid's question with a smile. It looks to be that way. I wish he would have at least sent a message. The man took the top hat he was wearing off his head, placed it on the table and then rested the staff he was holding across his lap. This staff had a color similar to that of congealed blood, and the veins that covered it writhed as if they were alive. This staff was called Vladimir, and along with the wise Sienna's Akasha, it was one of the only 2 staves on this continent that had been made with a dragon heart. This man was the only one of the 3 mages of incarceration who resided in Helmuth, a black wizard with the title of a Count, Edmund Kodrith. He stroked his mustache as he smiled. Your Grace, are we the only 2 members of loyalty attending this meeting this time as well? If it's like this, we can't even call it a proper meeting, Edmund sighed. In fact, there's no real need to call it a meeting, Gavid corrected him. My only intention was to casually discuss our opinions on the current situation. Demon folk and humans have very different senses of time, so if we don't have appointments like this, it might be decades before we all see each other again. Edmund shrugged. If it's just a few decades, that would be fine with me as well. Perhaps even longer than that might still be acceptable. Gavid asked, are you still searching for eternal life? You should already be close to it. Huh. The eternal life that I have currently obtained is nothing more than extending my own human lifespan, Edmund said dismissively. Can that really be compared to the demon folk who are truly eternal beings? It's not that different even for us. Just as strong humans can live for a long time, strong demon folk live longer than the rest. Gavid muttered softly, but Edmund just smiled broadly without saying anything in response. Gavid was well aware of his reasons for this. The 3 mages of incarceration, the 3 black wizards who had signed a personal contract with the Demon King, were all eccentrics. No, they were all people who, while human, possessed an insanity that was inhuman. The Tower Master of Aratha's Black Tower of Magic, Balzac Ludbeth, wanted to see the very peak of all magic. He wanted to go far beyond the limits of what humans had managed to reach and was obsessed with the peak of magic that any human should surely be unable to touch. No, the question was whether such a peak even existed in the first place. Vladmir's owner, Edmund Kodrith, wanted to improve his genus as a human and become an entirely new species. He aspired to become a new breed of human by abandoning everything that made him human-like, such as his thoughts and behaviors. By refining his demonic power to the extreme limits of what mana could reach, he planned on undergoing metamorphosis and becoming a new breed of human. As for the Dungeon Master of the Desert, Amelia Merwin. Gavid's eyes, which had been completely still, suddenly trembled. He stared at an object in the night sky that was flying toward them from a distance. For a moment, Gavid wondered if he was hallucinating. He even suspected whether or not he might be dreaming right now. This was the first time he had been so astonished since he was last pushed back by the stupid Hamel's rampage 300 years ago. "Edmund," Gavid called out. "Yes, Your Grace." Edmund responded. "Come here, and take a look at that," Gavid instructed. "Just what on earth does that look like to you?" Edmund tilted his head to the side in curiosity at the sudden summons. He got up from his chair and walked over to Gavid's side. He then stood there with his face pressed against the glass wall as he looked up into the distant night sky. Whatever it was fast. Even at this very moment the flying object was quickly drawing closer to them. The closer it got, the better the view they had of the flying object's appearance. Edmund gasped in surprise and took a few steps backward. Had he made a mistake with the spell? Oh, it couldn't be. Edmund shook his head, rubbed his eyes, and then gazed out the window once more. Now the flying object was so close that he didn't even need to use a spell to see it very clearly. But it was a gigantic head. How else to describe it? Made from expensive and rare metals such as orichalcum, mithril, and adamantium, a marvel of magical engineering that had been made into a flying airship. No, a flying head. With that head alone, you would have enough money to buy 10 of the buildings in Helmuth and still have some left over. "It appears to be a head," Edmund choked out in disbelief. It wasn't just a simple head. Curly hair sprouted from the head, writhing like tentacles and flapping like wings. A red horn also sprouted from the top of the head. The huge eyes were just as large as the head they were set in and twinkled as if stars had been embedded within them. Ahaha! The forehead split open. The queen of the night demons, Norgiabella, raised her arms in glee from where she sat on her velvet throne. Nor cried out, "What do you think of my Giabel face?" Her cry was met with silence. It was originally planned to be shown during the completion ceremony of Giabella Park. But it was completed much sooner than I expected, so what else could I do? That's why I've decided to show it to you first. Isn't it amazing? Nor asked excitedly. Edmund and Gavid stayed dumbstruck. Unimpeded by their silence, Nor continued, "The Giabel face will be the mascot of the Giabella Park. The Giabel face will float above in the skies during the mornings, noons, evenings, and nights. At all times, the guests of Giabella Park will be able to look up at this face and be filled with love and awe. Tormented by their lust for me, they will squander their savings at the casino and even spend their life force." "I'm ashamed just looking at it," Gavid muttered to himself with a shake of his head. Edmund, who was keeping to the rear, also looked like he felt the urge to say some things that he really couldn't afford to be saying. But Nor didn't feel the slightest offense at their dry reactions. With a snap of her fingers, the metallic expression of the Giabel face slowly began to change. Gavid and Edmund kept their silence as they watched the Giabel face smile. Gavid was slightly afraid that the citizens of Pandemonium who lived far below might still be able to see this shameful display. "Smile," Nor sang cheerfully as she lifted the corners of her lips with both index fingers in a smile of her own. Then she stood up from her velvet throne and walked out of the cockpit. Clack 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 clack. The carpet on the floor of the cockpit extended forward on its own. Noir walked gracefully down the red carpet and approached the glass wall. Then she casually passed through the glass and entered the inside of the room. Noticing the empty seats, the corners of Noir's lips curled upwards in a sneer. So the master of the Dragon Demon Castle is absent this time as well? Noir unknowingly repeated. It can't be helped, Gavid replied. Humph, I'm really curious. Just how much longer are you going to allow the problem of the Dragon Demon Castle to fester? Isn't it enough that you overlooked them for the past 200 years? Noir demanded. 200 years might be considered a long time, but it isn't that long for a dragon, Gavid argued. Even if the young master of the Dragon Demon Castle is unsuitable for his position, we still need to wait another 100 years. And why exactly should we wait any longer? Noir insisted. Because of how rare demonic dragons are. See here, Gavid, 300 years ago fallen dragons were rare and worthy of being used as a symbol of our strength. But aren't things a bit different now? Gavid reminded her, no matter what the era, dragons have always been seen as great and noble existences. It's difficult to give up on the symbolic importance that comes from having had such an existence fall and be bestowed a title from the Demon King of Incarceration. 300 years ago, dragons were indeed such an existence, Noir readily agreed. But now, it has been 300 years since the dragons disappeared into hiding. Are there even any dragons still active in modern times? In any case, dragons are like beings from their distant myths to the people of this era. Don't you think that, instead of such an obsolete symbol, it would be a better symbol to have someone who has successfully become a duke while still being a human? As Noir said this, she turned to Edmund and addressed him. What do you think, Edmund? If you so wish, I will gladly lend you my strength. You understand what I'm trying to say, right? I'm telling you that I will gladly rip apart the young dragon of the Dragon Demon Castle with my own hands. Edmund awkwardly laughed. I'm quite grateful for the offer, but... Humph, why are you acting so innocent? Noir said poutily. I like you so much because you're a freak. What if the master of the Dragon Demon Castle does end up being defeated and we need to choose a new duke? Rather than one of those fucking marquises who snoop around me, trying to keep me in check even as they dream above their station, I think it would be better to raise a count like you in to become a duke. I didn't know that you thought of me so highly, Edmund humbly prevaricated. If you didn't know it before, then keep it in mind from now on, Noir insisted. If you want, I can personally send a message to the Demon King of Incarceration. In exchange for my help, I'll take the corpse of the young dragon for myself. After all, you already have Vladimir, right? Gavid, who had been silently listening to this conversation take place, sighed and waved his hand in dismissal. Don't bring up such things to our Demon King of Incarceration when he's sure to disallow it. Also, Noir, just what would you even do with a dragon's corpse that makes you want it so? Every piece of a dragon has its uses, no? First of all, I plan to process its scales, leather and bones to make weapons and put them on display as prizes for the Giabella Park Casino, Noir revealed, her reply exceeding all imagination. Gavid stared at Noir, unable to think of what to even say to this. Noir just smiled happily in the face of his surprise. The Giabella Park's casino will be the best casino in all of the past, present and future, Noir proudly declared. There is surely no other place in the world where weapons made from a dragon can be exchanged for casino tokens. It's sure to be a shocking facility in many ways, Gavid eventually said drily. Also, the dragon heart will be transplanted into the Giabella face. The magic generator I currently have installed in it is great, but if I can transplant a dragon heart into it, wouldn't it be even more amazing? Noir said with greed in her eyes. Edmund stared at the Giabella face floating outside the window with narrowed eyes. At first glance, that flying object practically drowning in narcissism looked ridiculous, but as an archwizard, Edmund realized that it wasn't simply a head given the ability to fly. For her to have even thought up the idea of linking the eyes of her flying vehicle to her own demon eyes, regardless of whether it is even magically possible, I'm forced to acknowledge just how absurd Duke Giabella's mana truly is, Edmund thought. Demon eyes, which could be activated with just a glance, all consumed large amounts of mana. The demon eye of fantasy possessed by Noir Giabella was one of the strongest among all the demon eyes that were said to have existed in the world. Her demon eye, as its name suggested, had the power to turn reality into fantasy and fantasy into reality. Noir was planning for this gigantic Giabella face to float in the skies above the facility that also bore her name, Giabella Park. When it was eventually completed, Numerous tourists would be coming to Giabella Park every day. If a floating object as bizarre as the Giabelle face was hovering around in the sky, one would have no choice but to look at it at least once, even if one didn't want to see it. At that moment, the tourists would be captured by the demon eye of fantasy and fall into the illusion crafted by Noir Giabella. I know that I am repeating myself, but the demon king of incarceration will not rescind the title of the young master of the dragon demon castle, Gavid reminded Noir. Then what about a hunt? I don't like that young dragon, so if it's for my desires, then the demon king of incarceration won't stop me from hunting it, will he? Noir asked. If you do that, I will be the one to stop you, Gavid said in a calm tone. However, deep within his eyes, a red light was shimmering. It was the light emitted by Gavid's demon eye of divine glory, a demon eye on the same level as Iris's demon eye of darkness and Noir's demon eye of fantasy. I guess a lot of time really has flown by. You who were once called a slayer, are instead acting as the guardian of a young dragon, Noir commented sarcastically. Gavid told the truth. It's not about protecting the young master of the dragon demon castle. To keep you in check. Even if they aren't fully grown yet, a dragon is still a dragon. For someone like you who's already powerful enough as it is, I don't want you to become intoxicated by the power of the dragon heart. This was just a light warning of Gavid's power. Noir was also only acting tough. She probably didn't have any intention of seriously hunting the young master of the dragon demon castle. Fine, I got it. So can you stop with that creepy gaze of yours? Noir whined as she brushed back her thick wavy locks of hair with a smile. At this, Gavid also shrugged and deactivated his demon eyes of divine glory. Edmund, who had just been watching the two of them, also laughed politely and returned to his seat. Once the two dukes start playing mischievous pranks and pretending to be angry with each other, it's hard for me to even breathe properly. So please let us talk about something else, Edmund proposed. Has there been anything interesting going on lately? Noir inquired. I think it depends on your opinion of what counts as interesting, Edmund said as he pulled a hand out of his coat and held it up. When his hand lightly stirred in the air, a whitish orb the size of 2 fists appeared above it. This was the soul of a human. I'm not fully certain of this, but, Edmund touched the soul with his fingertips as he spoke. It seems that a hero and a saint have appeared. Gavid narrowed his eyes.